I'm Julia Sutherland and thank you so much for joining us this morning for today's Tune Into Tourism live interactive tutorial, which by popular demand by you is today going to be all about search engine optimization, SEO. So we hope that today's session is going to be really useful with loads of practical tips for you and for your business. We're going to be getting to grips with SEO in plain English, I promise, with easy steps for you to take. Now, given around 80% of online transactions begin with a search query, and search engines like Google are where most people start their holiday planning, getting SEO right is crucial for your business. So we've got two guests today. Firstly, we've got Neil Rudrum from the Edinburgh Corn Exchange. Good morning, Neil. Thank you very much for joining us. You have got an awful lot to think about when it comes to SEO, don't you? You've got quite a few different aspects to your business: venue, events, attractions. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the Edinburgh Corn Exchange is a multi-purpose events venue. We put some events on ourselves, so we promote some events, but mainly we're there to host other people's events. And that can be weddings, birthday parties and special occasions, and it can be corporate conferences and training days and exhibitions.
So your website really has to be multifunction, so you've really got a lot to think about. Well, we've also got our other guest today who's going to be our expert guide through these stormy waters, through all the mechanics of SEO. It's David Goldie from Macromedia. Thank you so much for coming in today, David.
Thanks for having me.
So you tell us a little bit about your background in all this kind of thing.
So I've been involved in search for about 13 years now. Worked with a number of agencies in digital marketing, but essentially work at the moment with Macromedia as the accounting project director there.
And you've got some tourism clients?
Yeah, got a few tourism, we've got lots of experience in the space, but we work with a number of ones in the city alone. People like Scotch Whisky Experience, and we work with from further flung places like Dewars, Aberfilter Distillery. So a number of venues, but also we've got experience in actual, heads on beds in terms of hotels and so on.
Yeah, and it is different. It is different for different kinds of businesses, which we'll get into later. Yeah. So it's good you've got a good range of experience there, which is fantastic. But today's tutorial is, of course, for you, and we want you to be asking your questions of our expert here, and also sharing your experiences. If you've got something that you've learned that's working well for you, please do share it. That's very much what these sessions are about as well. And Richard's going to be in the chat box where you can do that, monitoring all those questions. Richard.
Thank you very much, Julia. Yes, I am here. And although I'm going to start off with a little bit of envy, because HIE Live Official are watching us and they've said good morning. And they've got a blue tick next to their name in the chat box, like an official blue tick. I want to know what I need to do to get verified by live stream. But despite that, Emma McAllister Hall has joined us. Anna Trafford's here. Joan Bishop. Hello, Joan. We love having you with us from Dornoch. And we've got people watching from Fort William and Kintyre and all these places. So do feel free, please get in touch. Any stories that you've got about your own websites, any questions you've got, any best practice, do get in touch and I will put the questions to the panel. And also, although in the live room here, I can sort of talk and interact with you, but anybody who's watching this on catch up on YouTube, I will transfer those questions over to make the experience good for them too. Julia, back to you.
So great, we've got people from all over the country, and David, it is so important, isn't it, that tourism businesses get SEO right? Why is that?
I suppose SEO is a means to generate traffic for free, essentially. So unlike paid search or paid social or email marketing, you maybe have a fee to actually send a mail. The traffic that flows through organic search comes to you gratis. The only cost would be the cost to actually go off and generate the work needed to get the site in a position where it's fight and fit and it's attractive to Google.
Mm-hmm. Now you said you've been working in search for 13 years. An awful lot has changed in that time, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's come on leaps and bounds when we started. Essentially where I started in this industry, it was a bit of the Wild West. There's lots of techniques which they're very outdated now but worked very well then. And essentially Google itself was a pretty straightforward matching content with search demand and looking at queries only. So look at a search term, find some content and match them up. And it's evolved a lot since then in terms of how it's progressed from a technical perspective in terms of what it finds attractive about websites, but also from a perspective of how much it's learned about searcher demand and search intent.
So some people might have addressed this a number of years ago and then kind of left it. What are maybe some of the myths that people have about SEO?
Yeah, so I think some of the things that have changed a lot, and people, the old saying goes, that, a little bit of knowledge is dangerous. And actually, a lot of techniques that get floated around, and you remember people read blogs and look at some information about SEO, and it could be 3-4 years out of date. And in that time, that's light years ago in terms of search. Things, when I started this industry, Google had maybe around about 3 or 4 big updates a year. It made big changes to the algorithm, and they were often named after things. Now we're in a position where Google actually makes more than 2 changes per day to the algorithm. So essentially you're at a stage where it's impossible to reverse engineer what's attractive. All we can do is kind of follow the path Google's asking us to do. So yes, it's moved on immensely.
And should we still be thinking of Google as a search engine?
Yeah, I think in terms of the UK market in particular, Google's around about 80 to 90% of the overall market share in terms of search. But the conception that Google is a search engine is, in a way it's a bit wrong really, because at the end of the day Google's an advertising platform. About $34 billion last quarter in terms of revenue, 90% of that came from search and display marketing. So essentially the products that Google uses to push advertising generate Alphabet, the parent company, about 90% of the overall revenues. So essentially the good organic search results that we look at and we expect to see certain things in there, the reason they are there is because they can sell advertising around that. So the better the search results, the more users will come back to Google. If suddenly the search results were hopeless overnight, then people start to migrate away. So it's a vested interest. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So how exactly does Google work?
Okay, so it's a really complicated thing, Google, in terms of trying to explain how it works. But essentially, from a straightforward perspective, Google goes off and crawls the web following links, essentially. It goes off after every website you can find, just crawls and follows paths. And it takes that information and then indexes it in a straightforward database, essentially, across millions of places across the world where it holds information, huge data sets. And then on the fly, when somebody searches a search query, Google uses around about the industry averages that people talk about, 200 or so signals on a website to basically say what's the best match for the search query. And it goes off and looks at a whole number of things. It says, but 200 people reckon. That's I'll caveat that because nobody really knows. It's just what people expect and from data people have examined. But so it's really complicated. But actually, from a perspective of how difficult it is to do, it's pretty straightforward to understand. There are only around about 5 or 6 key things that Google's interested in, and all those signals can be put into groups essentially.
What do you mean by signals?
So, as I say, I look at individual websites and web properties and try to get a handle on how best that is in terms of a search query match and search intent match to the content you've got. And it'll look at a number of things. It'll look at technicals of the website. So it'll look at things like the site health. Does the site have a lot of errors, a lot of 404 errors, for instance, broken pages, old content that's out of date, duplicate content? Does it have a structure which is not aligned to search demand and it can't crawl certain areas of the website? Does the site load slow? So it's really important now that the site is uber fast. So the slowed loading speed, that reflects badly on your website. And it looks at overall site health and say technicals. As well as that, it'll look at a whole host of other signals. So we could look at something like the usability or the UX of the website. So
UX?
User experience, yeah. So it'll look at things like the, in terms of usability and the signals it's given back to Google there. They're looking at things like the bounce rate of your website, click-through rate, the time users spend on the site, what they do when they get there, do they interact with content, do they download brochures, do they fill in inquiry forms, do they convert, do they book, essentially.
Mm-hmm. And what about mobile? That's become increasingly an important part, isn't it? I believe there's a statistic, something like 83% of people are having a poor experience, and that is stopping businesses from getting those bookings, from getting that business.
Absolutely. And I think mobile has moved on dramatically, and going back a good number of years ago, every year was going to be the year of mobile. And essentially, we've passed the point a few years ago now where more than half the overall traffic on the web comes from mobiles. And in terms of some of our clients, we observe that sometimes it's 4 out of 5 searches and 4 out of 5 visits come from a mobile device, depending on the sector. But from understanding mobile, Google now introduced earlier this year and late last year, they moved to what we call a mobile first index. So essentially, it's looking at websites and saying, if you're not responsive, if you don't have a great mobile experience, then you'll be downgraded in mobile results. So sites which may appear okay in desktop search will not appear well in mobile. So you could lose dramatic visibility from people.
And that is just so important, isn't it? If that is how people are booking holidays, if that's how they are going to find your business, if you're not working on mobile, Google's not going to, be having you coming up when they're
Absolutely,
searching.
yeah. And I think a lot of people have a misconception that people don't book on mobile. They maybe browse and do the research process. You sit on the bus or the train in the morning, you'll look at holidays, you'll look at weekends away, but don't book. But actually, I just read a stat from John Lewis that this year, 17% increase in mobile conversions this year. So it's now become the most important channel for them online. Mobile's ahead of desktop and tablet, so it's grown massively. People are quite happy to spend big sums of money on mobile.
And I think it's still surprising that message doesn't seem to be getting through. Neil, is that something that you guys look into? Is mobile important in your
Yeah, absolutely.
In your
Massive. The key times through the day where we notice, especially when we're promoting some events and people are buying. We think, I don't know if this is right, but we think that people maybe learn about things through social media, but they make decisions and they buy through Google. So one of our events we did this year in October was the Big Gin Festival, and we did very little advertising through Google. We had a lot of paid advertising on social, and then through the referral links, vast majority of tickets were being purchased through our website. And we can only presume that you learn about it through social, but then when you remember it, get onto Google, find it, and then come out.
And your site's optimised for mobile, presumably that's...
It's pretty good.
Yeah. And it's funny, it's the basic things, I think, David, that I'm always surprised at when I'm out and about and I'm on my phone and when I'm trying to book things, like on the main page, not finding a phone number and not being, the basic, getting the basic information right. It's so important, isn't it?
Yeah, I think a lot of websites now have moved to a design principle where it's as little on the site as they can get away with because they expect it to be used on a mobile device. So you'll see a lot of websites full experience on a desktop now where they don't have a top level navigation, they just have a hamburger menu, the little three icon, because they expect that that's the best way for the people to use and interact with the site. And people on a desktop will happily click that and then go off and come back and drive through the menus from there.
So a lot has changed, as you said. You talked there about some of the signals, and we'll talk a wee bit more about those in a bit. But there's also the ranking factors. Can you tell us what those are?
Yeah, so those 200 or so signals that we talked about are all individual ranking factors. So those, I sometimes explain this, if you say 200 different signals, people say, well, where do you start? But not all signals are created equally, and not all ranking factors are equal. So there are some which are more important than others. So you can say that things like the overall domain authority of a website, how important it is in terms of how search engines perceive it. That's a higher, somebody's domain ranking or page ranking of a page is actually.
What does that mean?
Okay, so search engines give a kind of arbitrary scores to pages based on all those factors, and then they kind of score how it sits. So we'll look at a number of tools which we use to say, is this a good site or a bad site? So
that's sort of overall score?
Yeah, and all that feeds in from those 200 or so signals into these groups of sets of ranking factors. So say we talked about user experience and usability, technicals. Authority is really important, and I think one of the myths that people have still got is that links aren't important anymore in SEO because the Google essentially went through a big shift a few years ago where they implemented a whole new algorithm called Penguin, which essentially downgraded bad quality links, and since then they've went through a process saying all links have to be relevant, not just from important sites, but actually relevant to your topic or your industry or your sector. But links are still vitally important, and those are, when we look at a website, the first thing we'll look at in terms of how authoritative it is how many good quality backlinks it's got from good other domains. So if you do a PR piece and you get picked up and you get links from BBC and The Guardian.
So something that BBC's got a great
authority. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the more important a website, the higher the authority. So
and if you link back to that, then you get the benefit.
You get a link from them. So essentially, if you do a piece of content which gets picked up by these types of people or by tourism boards or Visit Scotland or something, then you would get a link benefit from that.
Okay. Well, gosh, it sounds like it's getting so much harder. There's no cheats, there's no easy way around it. You really need to think about all of these things. Richard, I believe you got some questions coming in from the chat box.
I absolutely do. And just as everybody was asking if you could put that ranking slide up again, which is up now, so you don't have to look at my face. You can look at the ranking factors, content, technology, backlinks, and all that kind of stuff. So here we go. I've got a few questions. You can choose which ones you want to answer. and in which order. So Jane has asked, looking through Yoast SEO, help with key phrases, please. Yoast talks about focus, key phrase in the introduction, key phrase density, etc. So any help on key phrases. And her follow-up question is also meta descriptions, question mark, question mark, question mark. So we'll start there, and there's lots more questions if you want to come back to me if just about loading speeds and mobile stuff as well. So, but we'll start with those ones just now. Julia, back to you.
Well, that is a very important place to start, I think, isn't it, David?
Yeah.
So, do you want to...
Yoast.
Yes.
Yeah, let's start with Yoast.
Yeah.
Yoast is a plugin that you use on WordPress, which is a technology you've probably all heard of by now. And it's a fantastic tool because it allows you to very easily add a page title to the page, which Google looks at as the most important on-page factor in deciding what a page is about, what the topic is.
Right.
And it also allows you to create a meta description, which we'll touch on in a second. But the focus keywords is a tricky one. Actually, I was speaking to a client just last week about this because they've often done a fair bit of work around taking focus keywords that Yoast has suggested essentially and tried to build content around that. But Yoast's problem is that actually the focus keywords, it shouldn't just be a keyword, it's really what the topic of that page is, and that's what you want to try and get it to rank for. So essentially, you can add, it will give you a kind of scoring factor. It'll be like a traffic light and say, is it good, bad, or indifferent? But really what you should be concentrating on is, what is the page about? You know, what's the theme of the page? If you had to say in a headline what it's going to be, like a news article, what is the headline? That tends to be the page title.
And how specific should that be?
Well, it should be unique, first of all, across your whole website. Every page should have a different title because, as I say, the first factor Google looks at when it comes to web pages, what's the title of the page? And if you, quite often we see very generic titles across the site or pages with no title because nobody's filled them in. So Google's starting to guess immediately what's the page about. It's trying to follow the content and understand. So you've got a chance to essentially tell Google up front what the page is, what it's about, what the topic is, and then that should match through the content. So other areas like the H1 tag of the page, the header tag, which is this kind of subheader you'll usually see, that should follow the same keyword theme, the same topic.
And is this like when Neil, for example, they've got the wedding fair, he doesn't want, when someone's searching for wedding dresses for his site to come up, he wants wedding fair, wedding events. So is it that sort of thing? Can you give us some examples maybe for tourism businesses, the kind of things that they might want
so
to
if you
use?
just, from a really simple perspective, if you said Dornoch, okay, so if somebody's searching for Dornoch, the first thing they're looking at is golf, right? So you know right away that the indication is that usually the search intent, if somebody types Dornoch, Google will associate Dornoch with golf. So it will start to display content about that. So if you just put in, Dornoch as your title of a page because you're in Dornoch, then you're giving Google no indication of what you're about. So what you should be saying is, we're an accommodation business, so and it's the Royal Hotel that's behind it, right? So we're going to say the name of the page should be on the home page, the Royal Hotel Dornoch, or the Royal Hotel 5-star accommodation in Dornoch.
Right.
So you basically
as specific as possible.
Yeah, it's very specific, but you have a certain amount of characters to use. We reckon somewhere between 40 to 50 is a good number. Any further than that, it will get cut off and you won't see the full description. Okay. So you really should be thinking about a title of the page. It should be, what's the topic? And if you can use the brand name of your brand as well, great.
Okay, right. And what about the meta description?
Yeah, okay. So meta description is something else you can control through Yoast and WordPress, but you can do it in most websites. And essentially the meta description, if you look at the search result pages and you type a query, you'll get a whole list of stuff will pop up in front of you. And if you look at what you'll normally see is a link to a page, and then there'll be 2 lines of text underneath that normally. Sometimes it's more now, they can extend them slightly further, depending on the search query. And that is controlled from the meta description in most cases. So if you can write a meta description, which is essentially a bit like your own organic advert. So if you create a text ad in Google AdWords, you'll use a headline and then some text, which is the hook, the sales message. And in our meta description, you can do exactly the same thing. You can talk about 5-star accommodation Dornoch right next to the golf course. So that gives you, people can see that page and it allows them to make a better judgment on, is it a good, should I click it or not? So that influences.
Is that what comes up underneath?
Yeah, under the link, yeah.
The link.
So it doesn't influence SEO directly anymore, it's not a signal per se, but what it does do is it influences click-through. And that is very much something that's important.
That's really interesting. I didn't realise that that's where that came from. I've quite often you've Googled things before, just showing my ignorance here, but the thing that comes up in the description I can never find anywhere on the website.
Yeah,
so I'm like,
yeah.
where did that
Yeah,
come from?
often
But
it's
that's
not.
what that is, that's the meta description. Okay,
Yeah, and
fantastic.
if you don't pre-populate that with something, Google will try and create one from the
Yes.
content on the page, and it can be quite
Okay.
muddled sometimes.
So much better to do
Yeah,
that and
definitely.
get that nice and clear, because that is, like, as you say, like an advert for free.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you very much for that, David. Richard, have you got some more questions for us?
I do. I have one specific question here from Andrea Holden. Can you tell us, please, what is a good/acceptable loading speed for a website is now? I do, and how do I know the speed of my website? Because, like a lot of people in the Highlands and Islands, are on a slower internet connection there.
Okay, great. Okay, so I think the first thing to do is there are a number of tools we can use which are free to test the speed of your website. Not the speed of your internet connection, which is something totally different.
You
as
can't
imagine.
control that anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the first thing to think about is to look at some of these tools. Now, if you Google something like Page Insights or from Google, there's a developer tool which is free, or Lighthouse, another tool you can use, which you can essentially pop your URL in, enter, and it will give you a report on the page. It will take the speed of the page load, the first time it was pinged, how long the response time from the server was, a whole host of information. But it will also, if you're not very technical, what it does do is it gives you a scoring out of 100 and says,
Right.
is it good or bad? So it'll be, again, traffic lighted, so you'll see if your site is fast. What's a good score in terms of time? For a site which has any kind of e-commerce functionality attached to it, so you want to sell something, for every second your site takes a load, you're going to lose people. People drop off. So I would say for something that's e-commerce, you're looking at under 2 seconds for a full page load is where you should be aiming for.
Okay.
And what that means is that's the whole page, not just a little bit of the page loading and it keeps loading and loading and loading. There's lots of techniques to use, page side caching of content. There's you can
Say that again?
page, so you can cache content essentially, so that essentially once it's been loaded once, it'll load again without
Right.
having to go through the whole process. But the biggest thing I see all the time, and it will be on 90% of websites when there's an issue with load speed, it's usually down to images being too big. So
Right.
again, if you think about mobile being the most important channel for loads of people, there's no need for a 3 gig massive image on your like high res perfect photo on a mobile, because you can't make a detail of it anyway. So really, the smaller and best optimized images can be, then the better the page will load, because those are usually the first factor I'll look at when I see a page takes ages to load. I'll check the images, and often we see beautiful photography because they're trying to showcase something, which is understandable, but that has to then be optimized for online.
Okay. Well, I think that's really useful. Yes, go for it.
I
Neil.
was just wondering, because sometimes the page would take forever to load, and I just presume it's my internet speed.
Yeah.
And so, is there any way that you know that the website's the problem instead of my internet?
Yeah, so I would normally, if it's a client site, first thing I'll do is I'll actually take that URL, pop in one of these tools, and just get a report and take
Dave,
an
can you tell us
understanding
what the names are of those? And maybe Richard, you could put those in the chat box. What was the name of those
So
tools?
one of them, if you just Google for it's Google Developer Tools. So if you look at Page Insights, Page Speed, I think the name, they've just changed the naming convention, but I think it's Page Insights is the name.
Page Insights,
But
so
it's,
just
it's
Google
under
that.
Google Developer Tools. You can't miss it. It'll be the first thing if you type in Google Page Insights or Developer Tools, it'll come up as the first thing. And
The other one was
Page Speed.
Lightbox?
Lighthouse.
Lighthouse, sorry.
Yeah, Lighthouse is another one.
Okay, sorry to interrupt you there.
That's
Just because
okay.
they're useful things that people can actually
Yeah.
get onto right away. So you can check that. You can check, stick the URL in to see what the speeds are, and you can also check your own website speed,
You can
your
do
own
your own
internet connection.
Yeah, you can do that quite easily.
Yes, and then you just what's the website they use for that?
There's a whole host, but I usually just, if I'm doing that, I would just check my internet connection. There's about 3
Speed
or 4.
test, I think, is the one that I
one.
use,
Yeah,
yes.
it comes up with a little dial, and
It's really quick and easy.
Yeah.
So you can figure
you
out
can do it
which
on
one
mobile
of
as well.
those
You
is.
can do it on a mobile device. So they
Yeah.
work on mobile too.
Okay, fantastic.
As the developer of the site, so I'm on my website every day.
Yeah.
So if I load up my website in my office, then there's a good chance that maybe the cache.
It'll load quicker.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you have to use one of those tools
Absolutely.
so
Because
that
check.
you know what the customer experience
yeah,
is.
things like often if you want to just check, there's a quick issue. If you look through, just open an incognito window where it's not getting any caching in there, or you do a hard clear your cache and get rid of anything that's stored there, and it'll give you an indication, is it loading slow or not, and you can look at page. But there's actually, a whole number of tools. You can look at how things are firing on the page and what content is taking time and what's slowest to load.
there is so much to think about. Neil, obviously you're very involved. You're on, as you say, the website every day. Is this something that businesses, tourism businesses, can do themselves, or are they going to need a little bit of outside help?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the best way to look at it is the smaller the business. If you've got time to invest in SEO, let's say, there's some things you can do. I mean, I mentioned things like page titles and meta description. That's really simple to start with.
And that can make a big difference.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've seen last year we did work across a big e-commerce site where we implemented unique page titles and meta descriptions across the whole site. I tell you, we'd done 100 products to start with to test what kind of impact it would have. And the difference was transformational. We looked at what was the most important products, which they sold most of, which they made the best margin on, and we tested them first. And they had a great impact. So we then rolled out across the thousands of products on the site. At scale, it can take time, and often we'll look at, for product pages, we'll use formulas to try and take a way of an approach we can roll out across huge sites. But for a smaller business, it's only got 100 pages in the website or less than 100 pages. Then it's something you can do yourself. Just common sense. You can use. There's a number of tools to check what the best keyword or best search phrase to use on that page should be anyway. And then from there,
such as?
Also, Google themselves within the AdWords tool have what we call Keyword Planner, and it gives you a fair degree of information for free. There are other tools which we have, I suppose, kind of enterprise level access to, but there are a number of other ones which are kind of free. I think you can use SEO Moz on a free trial and use their keyword tool there. There's a keyword planner there. There's also one on Ahrefs, which I think there's a limited number, I think it's a month-long trial period. So to use this, first of all, get in there and have a look at it. It's a really good understanding. It gives you some good data to start with.
Okay, so there is, even if you're just doing the basic stuff, there's still things that you can achieve that actually people could achieve today. You know, the little changes that they can make that could have an impact.
Yeah.
But we talked about some of the Google signals earlier. You talked about authority. I think we have an idea of that, and of course, domain authority is really important. That's going to have a big impact on how you rank. Some of the other signals, the user experience, the UX, as you like to call it, and you talked about bounce rates and the time that people spend on your site. How can you affect that?
Okay, so first thing is, in terms of the importance of these signals, we track which of the signals are most important over time. So we look at a year ago, how if you look at the top 100 websites for a search query, how did that impact on it? How did it reflect back? So, for instance, we can look and say that over the last few years, the signal which is becoming most important is in terms of usability, user experience, how people interact with your website. It's now become the most important signal in Google's eyes and in many people's minds.
Really?
So
Okay.
I think things to understand there are, you can affect bounce rate, by first of all having a site that's fast, so people don't just click away before it loads. You can also affect it by having a good experience when people land on the page. So the content can be good. It can be the site can be well designed. It can draw you in and make you want to engage with the content. But often the bounce rate can be quite confusing because people look at having a high bounce rate sometimes. But actually, if a user lands on one page on your website and spends 5 minutes on it and reads all your content and goes off, then that counts as a bounce. But actually, they've got what they wanted in one visit. But you can affect it that way. In terms of the overall usability, Google. I mean, obviously, I think something like 55% of all websites in the world have got Google Analytics installed. So Google have got an incredible level of data, which they anonymise. They say they don't use and understand in search results, but they've got a data set from all these different websites. And what they do is they group websites together by sector or niche, and they'll say, okay, within travel and tourism, if you look at accommodation, what's a good bounce rate? What's the average? They'll look at things like, let's say, the click-through rate. They'll look at things like the goal completion rate. They'll look at the conversion rate. And they can take all these signals that they have from analytics, and they can then say, across that industry, what's the average? So if the average is 1.5 conversion rate and you have 2.2, then you're probably going to get you'll probably be up-weighted, essentially, from there.
Neil, you must get into Google Analytics when you're looking at your website. I saw you nodding there when you said those words.
Yeah.
How important is that for you then to monitor how effective your website is?
Well, we do look at it every week, but as you said, there's so much data there that it's very confusing to know even where to start. One of the key things is if, for instance, we have a buy tickets now or a book something now, that might be the reason they went there. They click that button and they're off, but the customer has done what they needed to do.
Yeah.
So it's not always a bad thing. I try and use analytics to find out why they've got to the site or how they've got to the site. So we do pay for a lot of social advertising, and especially when it's an event that we're trying to promote, to see if those adverts are working through the different social channels. And then trying to understand age, sex, area that they're looking at.
Demographic information, yeah.
But there's just too much. There's too much really.
So what do you focus on then? You focus on where people are coming from, where they've found out about you. That's your kind of main.
Yeah, well, because
concern.
we wonder. You mentioned earlier something about the amount of pages, and we wonder if there's just too many pages on the website. But because our business has, if you want to book a wedding or you want to book a conference, and someone who's booking a conference doesn't really want to see the wedding site, and vice versa. So because our venue can have everything in one place, we at the moment have a website that has everything. So we're trying to work out, is that the best thing? Do they come to the front page and then do they go off and find the links, or do they find the wedding page only and that works?
How's it saying postage, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I guess there's two things that come up from that, from what Neil's just said there. One is social. How important is social? Because that is one of the signals as well, isn't it?
Yeah, well, so in terms of social, I mentioned authority. Google uses links as, I suppose, an indication of how popular your site is. So that if you've got a lot of good quality links, then they'll say usually that's a vote of confidence from other websites. Until Google can come up with a really good understanding of social, I say that because it's quite easy to game. You could go off just now and buy 100,000 Instagram followers or Twitter followers for a few $100s,
Just meaningless,
right?
yeah.
But they're just bots, right? So until Google can understand social in a better way, the signals themselves are much more about, I suppose, where the traffic's coming from. Is it also coming from Facebook? Is it coming from Twitter? Do you get traffic from distant sources rather than just from search or just from email? And in terms of things like, how many likes your site's got or how many followers on Twitter, they're kind of meaningless in search, but from understanding the kind of, I suppose, the sales process in any business, social we often see is first of all, it's a great activation tool for brand activation. It gets people on the top of the hopper. People will come to your website quite often for the first time because they've seen they were targeted in Facebook, and we can be quite, even after GDPR, we can be quite specific in the types of audience we want to target. So if you're looking at gig goers, for people who want to come and see bands which are also like these types of bands, you can target them quite well. And then obviously we can track what they did, and quite often we see they'll come in, the first click will be through a social ad, and then the last click might be through an organic search or paid search later. Some clients have got quite long attribution windows essentially.
So your actual social, how successful you are on the platforms isn't necessarily going to affect your SEO, but if you've got click-throughs, then that...
Well, yeah, in terms of direct signal, there's no, if you look at how it correlates, people will say people with pages with more page likes or more followers generally rank higher in search.
Right.
But really, we don't know if that's because Google's taken that as a signal or if it's more to do with brand. If
So
they're
we don't
saying
really
the
know.
brand is more popular, oh, that's the
Yeah.
thing, they don't tell us, but essentially they've said before social isn't a signal, but actually we can correlate it and say, well, actually people who've got more likes or more followers and their content gets engaged with more often does tend to rank higher.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what about reviews? Because that's
massively
Google is
important.
changing, as I understand it. So reviews are now very high up as well.
Yeah, they're definitely a ranking factor. So we look at, especially in local search or things like travel, if you look for a B&B in Dornoch, the first thing you'll see is there'll be a MacPack listing with a number of businesses which will pop up, and you'll see reviews. They'll be from Google, they might be from TripAdvisor, they'll be pulled in dynamically. And that's from an indication, a click-through, people will look at a 5-star review before they look at a 3-star, and it draws your eye, but also from a understanding how Google perceives that website, how authoritative it is in the space for that search query. Reviews are definitely really important.
So whether you like it or not, Google's going to attach those reviews to your...
Yeah, and you
people's
have to
search
respond to them. We quite often see people you get a bad review and they don't do anything about it, and that's the worst thing you can do. You should really always respond to reviews, especially quite often some of the best PR you'll get is if somebody responds to a review, if somebody give a really stinking review. Quite often you'll see it'll make the paper or something, somebody's feedback on it. You know, actually you were the worst guest we've ever had.
Yeah.
You know, you bring 4 cats to the B&B. What's you meant to do?
Don't know how that's going to affect your SEO though, is it?
No.
Yeah. But that's a very interesting thing to think about as well, to stay on top of those reviews. So good to bring that up. Richard, I believe you do have lots more going on in the chat box. What other questions do you have for us?
Yes, I do. It's very lively. People are very interested in this. Joan, we will do our very best. Joan, our friend Joan in Dornoch, wants all of this written down in an email and sent to her because there's so much going on. I think we'll do our best because there's some really interesting things that are being said here. Right, so I'm going to rattle through a few questions and then you can take them from there. So, first of all, Jane wants to know, you might have already covered this, I was a bit lost in this chat room, how do we speed up the website? We've got slow websites, how do we speed them up? Secondly, Jane also wants to know, how can we work out what people were actually searching for by the time they came and landed with us? And then Angela wants to know about blogging. If you do regular blogging, is that going to get you up the SEOs? Paul Oldham is saying that they start blogging once a week and that massively improved their rankings on Google, and that was the best advice they ever got, was to do that. And then another question from Andrea was, if we put photos on a different server, will that speed up our website? So we maybe get to that. We start with speeding up, and how do we work out what people are looking for before they land on us? Julia.
We definitely will. We covered it a little tiny bit, but we'll get to it in a second. I just want to say, Joan, the full this full webinar will be available on the Hi YouTube channel, which is HIE Communications. So you can go back, scroll through, find the bits you want, and that should go up tomorrow. So just so you know, it's not going anywhere. It won't disappear after today. Right, David. The speeds. We talked a little bit about optimising the photo sizes. That was the first thing you go to in terms of trying to speed things up. What else can we do?
Okay, so quite often you'll find that there's a website, in terms of the way it's been coded or built, uses unnecessary code, or there's far too much code to load and it doesn't need to be there. There can be things like excessive use of JavaScript. There can be techniques such as there'll be lots of plugins being used in a website, and quite often they're historical. They've been there for a long period of time and haven't been used anymore, or are out of date. So I mentioned Yoast. That's a plugin. Right. So essentially, it's an easy way to add functionality to a website. So something like Yoast SEO. Before you'd have to add code to the back end to add a meta description. Yoast makes it easy for a non-technical person to add that stuff. Right. From a really simple interface, it's got a WYSIWYG editor like Word. So if you can use Word, you can use Yoast essentially. Right. But as well as that too, often we'll find that there's coding and techniques in the site which are just by nature slow, or they're a big resource to load. Often you'll find that maybe there's say the booking engine on a website is a third-party booking tool, so it's maybe iframed into the site, or it's pulled in through an API or a plugin of some type, and that just might be an outdated version which has been sped up and nobody's updated it yet, and it's sitting there 2 years out of date, and actually what it's doing is it's a big resource on the site and slowing things down in load speed. So yeah, it tends to be back-end stuff, and that's where most of the stuff is where you want to have some technical support. So
you are probably going to need somebody to give you a wee bit of an MOT there to say, why is my site going slowly? If we've looked at the pictures, it's not that. Can you see if it's the plugins or Java, whatever?
The tool I told you about, the Google Page Insights tool, what happens is when you add your URL in there and run the audit as such, it'll actually give you a list of all the things which are causing the site to be slow. And at that stage, you've got, I suppose, a hit list of what needs to be fixed. So you've got a good idea when you go to your development agency or your person that supports you technically. You have a good understanding of saying, okay, I can see these 7 things are slowing the site down. Google actually gives you a priority. It will say that's the most important one, so fix that first, then that one, and that one.
Okay, so there actually are tools out there to help.
Yeah, definitely.
The other one was I guess, content. We talked about blogging, and I know in the past when we've talked about websites, that was always a big tip. If you have a regularly updating content, a blog's an easy way of doing that. Is that still important?
Yeah, I'll tie that in with 2 questions then. So we'll tie it in with the first question, which was about how do you understand what people search for when they come to your website? Yeah. And we'll tie that in the content. So I mentioned a few of the tools we use. All search starts with keywords at the moment. And they may be typed, or they can be spoken, and we know voice search has grown dramatically. What's actually happened is, I say, Google's evolved to a stage where rather than matching a query to content, just an individual, hotel in Dornoch, that's the best page, it understands that people don't really search like that if they use voice search. So you may say, Alexa or Google or Siri, hey Siri, what's the best hotel in Dornoch under £100, right? And it'll pull up a data set from there and give you a search result from there.
Oh, you're lucky.
Yeah.
It understands you, but...
Yeah, well, usually, yeah.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really understand me very well. But I think from a perspective of using search queries, the best place to start is that. So somebody's got to, at the moment, you can't just think it and you go, well, you've got to say something or you've got to type something. So at that stage, you're given an indication of what you want to do. Therefore, there's lots of data on that around. So we can go off and start to examine what data is most important. So search of demand, which we call it search demand analysis, is the keyword analysis and understanding what people search for and how many people search for it, how often, look at that and trends. And does it, obviously at this time of year, there's a big, huge push in seasonality for Christmas gifting. There'll be lots of increased search demand for certain things. Advent calendars, all sorts of stuff will go up. They'll be dead all year round, and then in November they'll jump up. But as well as that too, you can actually, there's a tool Google gives you, again, free of charge, which is called Google Search Console. And if you can verify your website with that. It's dead simple. And what that does is it allows you a bit of an understanding of how people got to your website. Now, we get...
This was the question that was asked. So this is the one. Yes,
so
there's a tool there.
Search Console, if you look at performance, you can actually understand which queries people typed when they came to your site. And not only when they visited, but you can actually see how often your site appears in search results. So you've got two things, you've got impressions and clicks. And essentially we can say is, actually for this great way of understanding it is, we appear very often for this search term, but we don't get a lot of clicks for it. So that's immediately an opportunity. You can say, well, we already appear for that, why are we not getting clicks? Well, it might be because you appear too far down the page, so there's definitely an opportunity to do some work on that and try and rank better for that search term because there's lots of demand for it.
Right, so work generally on the rest of it, or maybe it's your metadata. Or
Well, you look at, the search queries themselves tie directly to what people came to the site and how often it's surfaced in search results. So that's exactly what people used to find you. And you can separate it out by brand and filter out all the brand queries because that's not really too important. It's what other terms did people use when they came to your website or found your website in search.
And are you then back engineering, are you then putting those into your keywords?
That's where Yoast comes in, things like Yoast. So you would, for instance, if you reckon that page, the page title should reflect on the search query somebody used. And the content should be about that topic. And it's not about just shoving keywords in anymore. It's much more about the overall topic and theme of a page. You know, what's the semantic topic? You know, what other related topics are there within there?
Neil, I'm really sorry. I feel like I've been ignoring you because we've just been
I'm taking
absolutely taking all we can get from David and asking these questions. Do you use these kind of tools? Have you ever used any of these tools before?
No, don't know. Again, on social, I do know the words you're using, insights and analytics there, but no, I didn't know they were there for Google as well. So.
Okay, well there you go. That's something you can go into. Richard, do we have more questions? I want to try and get through as much as we can because we're running out of time. We've only got a few minutes left.
We are running out of time, but like generally, just people are on board. The blogging thing, everyone's like just saying that people are sharing advice here about blogging, and you just need to keep it brief. It doesn't need to be huge. Paul said that he was advised 300 to 500 words for a blog article and a couple of nice pictures. And blogs also, and that's, I think, in terms of question. Oh yeah, here's a question from Andrea. Is it important for SEO to use paid for Google adverts? And that's probably the last question. But listen, if I don't speak to you again, thanks so much for everything that you've been saying here today. But yeah, paid for Google adverts.
David?
That was one of my points actually. Yeah. There's a misconception that paid search and organic search, if you pay for ads, you'll rank better in organic. You know, they're two different things altogether. They're actually run at the back of different things. So AdWords or Google Ads allows you to present a paid advert when somebody searches a search query. So you trigger an ad based on that search query. It's totally separate to organic search. What we often find is that if you have a paid search visibility as well as organic search, you've got more real estate on the page, so you're more likely to get a click. You've got a better chance of getting that click. You know, there's no direct correlation between having a Google AdWords account, spending money and getting better organic rankings. But what we do see is often that, you know, for huge brands, if they've had some kind of issue with Google, they've had a penalty applied to them, or they've been downgraded in rankings, you know, if they're spending 10 million a year on AdWords, the phone call gets answered quicker essentially than somebody at the bottom of the queue.
So they will be found more easily.
There's more visibility for sure, and it's something that I would recommend most businesses do.
But if you have paid for advertising, it's not going to generally affect your overall ranking
No,
through...
no, not directly. I say the one thing that will influence is how visible you are on the overall page.
Which is kind of what we're after,
Yeah,
isn't
totally.
it? Yeah. Do you use paid for advertising, Neil?
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Is it effective for you?
It certainly helps, but with Google, we found that you could be spending thousands in our sector, especially looking at wedding venues, Edinburgh, or conference venue, Edinburgh. You have to be spending really thousands to make a difference.
It's quite a crowded market.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I guess that could be an issue for accommodation providers as well in some of the busier areas of how do you stand out.
Yeah.
That might be one way to do it. So what are you doing then, Neil, at the moment for your SEO? You're doing some training, aren't you, at the moment, trying to figure out some more? Hopefully you got some
Definitely got
from David today.
Some notes.
How important is that for you and for your business?
What's that? Sorry.
SEO and understanding.
Oh, yeah, hugely important. One of our big things at the moment is our website's 6 years old, and it was perfectly built for us. You mentioned earlier WordPress, and WordPress seems to be taking over everything at the moment, and it seems pretty dominant. But we are wondering if we have to change our website, if we have to upgrade, if we have to replace, and as I say, do we split some of the events? So if you're a conference looker, you can look for a conference. If you're a wedding booker, you can look for a wedding. So we've started down this road, and we have got 6 years at least. We had a website before that as well, and for many years. So we've got years and years of Google sort of trust.
Yes, absolutely.
They know us. So if we just start a brand new website, does that just stop everything?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So key things to think about, stop and think. Most of them, I'll say this to any business that's got any online presence that they sell anything or book anything through. The biggest threat to your business is a migration of your website. Because if you're around a brand that's been around a long while, had lots of visibility, lots of authority, Google have got some trust in your domain, quite often a new development will come in, they'll build a website and they'll put it live and that's it done. So the thing you need to start with is understanding a migration plan to take all that previous history and authority and take it across to the new site.
Okay.
So it's about understanding what this, first of all, the site structure is a really good point you made there. You've got multiple signposting going on. Is it a conference venue? Is it a wedding venue? Really what you want to do is try and make sure that the best page surfaces and results. So some of the tips for wedding venues in Edinburgh, large wedding venue in Edinburgh, you want the wedding page to surface, not just the home page.
Yeah.
And that's about having a good navigation structure, but having a good site structure overall.
Yeah, and that's what you said about the UX.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
The UX, user experience. I had to Google it. Great. Well, listen. I think we are out of time. My goodness, I think we could do a whole other session on this. There's still so much that we didn't get to. But hopefully this has been useful for you watching. As I said earlier, this whole session, if you want to go back and rewatch bits and remind yourself of what was said, it'll be available on the YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/HIE Communications. But before we go, David, if you could give one top tip, one thing that people could do today to make steps to improving their SEO, what would it be? What was your top thing?
Top thing I would say is audit your site overall. Look at the site's health, look at how Google understands your site. Can it find all your content? Really simple way of doing that is to use a site : search in Google itself. So if you type site : and then put your full URL in there, it will give you an understanding of what you can see within what Google has a site of. And if you've got 100 pages and you can only see 10, then you know you've got a technical problem.
Okay, so you need to have a health check. Bit
Yes,
of an
MOT is a good place to start. Audit.
Okay, fantastic. Neil, what are you going to be going away today to do?
I'm going back for a health check.
You're going to go back for a health check. Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you so much to our guests today. Thank you so much, David,
Thanks for having us.
for all that information, and Neil as well for sharing your experiences too. David, you're an absolute mine of information. We might have to have you back. I feel like I've learned loads myself too. So as I said, the session will be available in full on the YouTube channel. We're also going to be making some shorter highlights from today's session and some top tips. So we will plug those through the Facebook page, where we will also be doing a little Facebook Live session. Richard and I do those. They're much more relaxed. On Thursdays and Tuesdays, where we can share the 3 things we've learned, a little bit more of a chat about what we've gone through today, and you can join in with those. And next week is the final live interactive tutorial of this series, and we're going to be getting in gear for bike tourism. Yes, we love a pun. So please do sign up for that if you haven't yet. It's next Wednesday, the 28th at 10 a.m. as per usual, and the links should be, Richard will put them in the chat box to sign up for that. Or you can have a look on if you just Google for it, Tune Into Tourism, it'll come up. So yes, thank you very much for taking part, for all your questions. I hope you've learned lots today and keep that conversation going. But for now, thank you very much. Goodbye.